All right. Good morning, everybody. We have just 2 items on the agenda for the working group meeting today. I do think I want to address them in reverse order because we do need to make sure that we hear from Daniel on any relevant release related things we need to know. Daniel, I see you've written an update there. Did you want to give us anything else?
Yeah, so today is supposed to start branch cutting for 126, but with the FITS PR, it seems pretty relevant for 126. Want to know if we should wait on that PR or if we should just go ahead with the branch cutting and cherry pick in, or if there's other PRs that might be at. I thought I saw one, but I go back and I can't find it now.
I think, in my opinion, we should do the branch cut, especially because it can take a few days to, at least historically, finish it. We can always backport things. So okay. This particular one, I could see why someone may not want it cherry picked. I think cherry picking would probably be fine.
Yeah, I think cherry picking would be fine. I wanted to ask before, making assumptions.
Yeah, I think as long as we get it in before like a code freeze RC, like cherry picking is fine.
Well, technically, code freeze is the day of branch cutting.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But TOC can override that. So,
yeah, I don't think for any feature, unless it's like so. Yeah, honestly, for any feature, even if it was the most important bug fix ever, I still think we should cut the branch. Just so we have the process going, and then we just make sure we cherry pick.
Well, the change is relatively small too, so it shouldn't be too difficult to cherry pick. If it was, touching every file or something like that, I might be a little worried. But
yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify before making an assumption here.
Yeah. One thing I do have PRs to bump dependencies on both Istio and Z-tunnel. Those might be useful to get in before we cut the branches. Obviously, those can be cherry picked too, but for whatever reason, I guess there's no real difference there. For whatever reason, it just feels like something easier to do before the branch cut than cherry picking, but it doesn't really matter too much. So.
Yeah, just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost too, because sometimes you branch cut and it takes a few days, and it's like, did this make it or did it not? And so, yeah, just trying to limit the number of PRs that we have to think about making sure they get backported. That's all I have.
John, the change you're referring to is the GoMod dependencies?
Yeah, then there's one in Z-tunnel as well that's changing other stuff.
I'm looking at that today.
Great.
The Z-tunnel one, sorry, that wasn't clear.
Sounds good. Anything else on the release? All right, then with that, I will hand it off to, I'll introduce my colleague Nilek. Nilek, I think this is your first time joining an Istio community meeting, is that right?
Yeah, I think this is the first time I'm probably speaking. I might have attended the meeting in the past and maybe interacted with some of you on the Slack, but yeah, it's the first time I'm probably presenting. Thanks.
Nilek joined my team at Microsoft from the upstream security team and is bringing some of his security insights to bear on Istio and has some design on revocation support. So Nilek, I'll let you take it away from there.
Right. So thanks, Mitch. So just to give context, right, we have been talking about this on the Slack thread. What can we do in order to provide the revocation? And one of the primary thought is, or the principle that we were operating on is, for workload certificate, it doesn't make sense because they're short-lived and we don't necessarily want to have a revocation. So that's our established line of thinking. However, for the intermediates, where specifically we are using the plugged-in CA, I think that that is where this might be relevant. For multiple different scenarios like multi-cluster and the compromised intermediates and whatnot. And this is where probably I thought it might be a good idea to sort of come up with a design. And thanks, Mitch and Costing, for some of the early feedback. So what I want to do is probably just go through on a high level what I put into a design, and then maybe talk some of the comments that I got from Costin and discuss on that, and maybe let's take it forward. So while designing or like while we were discussing about this thing, right? So one of the key component that I think I realized is uh, the when we get the CRL, we want to make sure that the proxies are aware of the CRL, and whenever they are trying to do the peer validation or like the MTLS validation, they could use that information, and then they can either accept or reject the request or the TLS handshake. And that means what we want to do is we want to make sure that the CRL information that we get can effectively get distributed to the proxies, both like Envoy and cTernal. So, and one of the, while discussing this aspect on Slack thread also, like one of the thing that I learned is like, the current method that we have where we use config maps and config map essentially to distribute the routes and root trust and things like that, right? Which can impose the limit of 1 MB for config maps and secret for that matter. That's something like etcd imposes on us to use it. So what to keeping this in mind, what I thought is maybe a design can be in a such a way that, or like what this design proposes is that we can expect an Istio pod to have a proxies mounted to them. Now, how they mount it, that can be a different thing. So let's say if it's less than 1 MB, they might as well just create, let's say, a config map or something, and then the config map can be mounted on the Istio pod, and then Istio when it boots up, it can read all that information and distribute that. Or let's say it is for some reason, let's say 100 MB, for example, right? Still probably like like what I'm proposing, it's user responsibility to make sure that they can mount that file onto the Istio pod. So for example, the alternative or the good way that I can think is use the CSI driver. So CSI driver can fetch the CRL from whatever source that user has, and then it can mount them into the pod before the Istio pod comes up. So and user can probably choose multiple different methods as to how they want to mount it, and maybe we can probably document like couple of these scenarios so that it's easier for users to get started. So
I think you've got a question from John.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
I'm not monitoring the chat, so feel free to stop me. Thanks. Sorry,
yeah, no problem. I just want to understand like the use case and the real world scenarios. Like my expectation is that a CRL is like, say 500 bytes long. We're talking intermediates here. So you're talking maybe, I don't know, 500 clusters in like an obscene scale cluster. And that's assuming you have to revoke all of them. You're still well under 1.5 megabytes. Like you're not even approaching, 250 kilobytes. Is there a practical reason why we need to be concerned about this limit? It may be that we end up just saying, hey, it's a file, so how you get it there doesn't matter. I'm just trying to understand, like, am I misunderstanding how we expect a user to use this?
Right. So honestly, I'm not aware of the scale aspect yet because I haven't tested any of it. But if it is safe, if you all think that if it's safe to say that the CRL won't grow probably for the intermediate scenario, it won't go probably like more than 1 MB or 1.5 MB or something. Maybe it becomes irrelevant, and it also might.
That could be the time where we push users towards alternate implementations of mounting the file, right? Today, it's a config map, like that's the default open source implementation and good enough scale for at least 80, maybe even 99% of users. And if they need to go past that, there's other options in Kubernetes for mounting files.
Right.
To be clear, pushing 1 megabyte to, 1 million workloads in the extreme case that John mentioned is not cheap at all. It will increase the startup time. We don't want all the data traffic and all the networking traffic to be consumed by CRLs distributing to everyone. It's bad if it is more than 1 megabyte.
I see. Right. So, okay, before I go ahead, I think Keith also has his hands up.
Yeah, the distribution cost on the network is a really good point. And I think for all practical purposes, a megabyte should serve as an upper bound. I think what that means practically is that our expectation is that users are pruning their CRLs. It's not something where you can just
Keep on
let it
going.
continue growing forever and ever and ever. There needs to be some pruning process. And I think that's the sort of key there. If we document that as an expectation, and it seems like that would be the industry standard, then we can sort of live with that 1 megabyte limit. And it might make the design probably a good bit easier.
Like, how messed up is your environment if you have 3,000 CRLs for your intermediates, right? Like,
Good point. Yeah, and actually, I think that's a good insight. And I think, as Keith mentioned, probably it's a safe assumption that it won't grow, and maybe we can document it basically. Like, hey, we expect it to be like this much, and if you are doing something crazy, either let us know, like what the issue is, or maybe you should take care of those things. Austin?
Yeah, one of my other comment was probably we should better document, in case more than 3 clusters are compromised, what is the process to roll the root CA instead of the intermediate CA, because that's really the most safe and most reliable and guaranteed to work. So you just need to put a new root CA, push, remove the old root CA, push, done. I mean, it's much faster, much more reliable, and it's very unlikely to have problems.
Right. So the compromise, and I agree with that. So compromise says the one scenario, and then we can definitely document that. And multi-cluster is another a scenario where like cluster is probably joining and leaving, and we want to make sure that we maintain all the list, just so that if somebody from the left cluster try to connect, and we want to make sure that that's TLS and check fits. But yeah, totally agree, and let's document that as well. Cool. So I think the next part is then interesting because what design I propose, considering that we have to deal with this 1 MB limit, is we can use the existing SDS and probably XTS for the Z tunnel to actually distribute these things and let the proxies read it. But I think if it is safer to do the 1 MB limit or operate with the 1 MB limit, then I think we can use the existing distribution mechanism that we have. Sorry, I'm not fully aware of it. I'm still trying to get a hold of the whole code base and how it is implemented. But from some of the comments from costing, what I got is we already have that in place. So I think what I can do is I can go back and change the design to include probably and look at what the existing distribution mechanism is, and then use that and make sure like Envoy or Z tunnel has that information, and we can.
I think XTS is the existing distribution mechanism. That's what we're using to like distribute workload certs, etc. today.
But the CA itself, go ahead, Austin. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No, sorry. What I meant by that is that we have the root certificate config maps that is currently used pretty much by everyone, where we have a controller that is writing config maps in each namespace and all that. And that's what I was proposing to put. But we also have the other thing that is coming with cluster trust bundles, which is going to replace this, but not necessarily remove it. I mean, if you have cluster trust bundles, so I'm saying that CRL should be part of, you should talk with the people working on trust bundles to make sure that upstream Kubernetes has capability to distribute CRL as part of their trust bundle, because eventually, in 5 years from now, it should be cluster trust bundle and upstream only. But meanwhile, the controller that is generating config maps in each namespace, it's rock solid, has been around for 5 years. It can live another 3 or 4 until upstream Kubernetes have everything we need. And it's already written, so it's
okay. Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, Keith, were you saying something?
I was going to say the same thing. I think the root CA is distributed via the config map, and that feels like a pre-existing thing. To the point about the cost of encoding the CRL and sending that from the control plane, like one of the biggest limitations of Istio scale is the XDS config. It's pretty large in sidecars. We do better in ambient, but that is one of our, marshaling that JSON, sending it on the wire. It's fairly expensive. And so you start adding in CRLs to thousands and thousands of proxies that can add up. So for that reason, I think I'm more in favor of the config map approach. I do think we need to take care though, because if cluster trust bundles don't currently support CRLs, then we get into this weird thing where we're sitting Istio CA, the Istio CA cert config map in some cases, but some other cases using the cluster trust bundle. And then other cases, like we can't use CTBs if you have any CRL, assuming I'm understanding all the APIs correctly. So I think that would bias me towards having a separate config map for the CRL, but I need to double check the implementation to make sure my understanding is correct.
Right. So I'm a bit confused. So what I want to get the clarity on is, so I think when I was discussing this, Mitch, what I understood was like one of the mechanism we distribute all this information, or like the secret information is through like the SDS, right? So what you all are recommending is like instead of using SDS per se, like we distribute that as a config map, and somehow config map can somehow the proxy can mount that config map and then read that CRL information from there. Is that correct understanding?
That's my understanding, at least, yes.
When we say we're distributing it as a config map, this is a config map mounted to Istio-D, which Istio-D then passes via SDS to proxies, right?
No.
No.
Istio-D reads mesh config or whatever it's reading. It creates a config map in each namespace. And it's a controller, namespace controller that is creating the config map in all namespaces. When a namespace is created, it creates a config map there. John, you probably know us.
Then Nilek, I led you wrong. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's fun to explore those things as well. The other question is then, what's the equivalent for the Z tunnel? Sorry if it's very new question.
John, can you confirm? I mean, I think Z-tunnel can easily mount a config map with a root, or it's already doing it because it needs to get the root CA somehow. I see that.
Not quite. Oh, let me go back to the previous thing and then I'll go to Z-tunnel. So what you were saying with the config map everywhere directly mounted on the proxy, that would work for sure. Maybe has issues with cluster trust bundle. If we want to stop doing config maps, maybe we keep config maps just for CRLs, which is kind of niche, whatever. We can figure that out. The other approach that just Istio-D reads and pushes it down to SDS, it could be made to work in some way, but just keep in mind that sidecars don't use SDS to talk to Istio-D. They speak to the local Istio agent. So you'd have to pass it down some out-of-bound way, translate that into the SDS response. It's possible, but it doesn't work exactly like just config map to SDS and you're good to go. So it's a bit more complicated that way. I probably wouldn't go with that approach. On to Z-tunnel. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, before going to Z-tunnel. So to me, it seems like it's possible both like via the config map approach or like via directly like going through the SDS route. But is it safe to then assume that maybe let's first try with the config map approach then?
First and last. I mean, it is possible, but the effort to implement it, test it, maintain it, it's making it unfeasible in my opinion.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll start with that approach then. Cool, thanks. Sorry, John.
Yeah, and then with Z-tunnel, so yes, it could easily mount a config map and read that. That's no problem. Today, it's not doing anything like watching config map. Actually, that's not true. It does watch the token. So I guess it could watch. There's plenty of things that it reads only at startup. We could make this dynamic. Today, we're not reading root certs from the config map though. Well, we do technically, but that's the root cert to talk to Istio-D. That's not the root cert to talk to workloads. How we get the root cert to talk to other workloads is via the CSR API to the Istio CA. That's another option, is potentially we stick the CRLs there, but the whole API is a little flawed. So I can get into details of that, but I don't want to derail us too much if it's not useful.
I see. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's helpful. So I think then,
Sorry,
I-
I to interrupt. Since John mentioned, so for my own understanding, the tunnel connects to Istio D, needs to read the root certificate. Where do you find it? It's not in that config map.
So to connect to Istio, we read the config map, but
Yeah.
then we connect to Istio, and then we get a root
Okay.
cert back in for connecting to workloads. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. But you mount the config map, so if he puts CRLs there, you will have it.
Yeah, you just need to be careful that it's like we mount the config map and the CA cert is Istio and the CRLs is for workloads.
Yeah, I know.
Perfectly fine.
But-
We just need to be aware that it looks like they're probably for the same thing, but they're actually for two different things. Well, technically CRLs we
I
could
see.
use for Istio as well. So
But the certs that you're mentioning, I mean, the roots of trust, the fundamental root of trust, are still, where do you get them from? XDS or it's not from the config map?
it's from the CSR. We look at the last part of the chain to get the roots. It's a terrible API. It matches what micros do.
That's broken. I mean, you know that you can have multiple root of trust. You have, it's not necessarily that the last root of trust is the same, and you can have multiples.
It
So it would be
is
better to, if we do this, to actually read all the roots from this config map, like all the sidecars and everyone, just to have consistency and ability to have multiple.
yeah, it's broken in a way that works stupidly. Basically what happens is we have a chain and it may like it's a list of strings, right? And so you have the leaf, intermediate 1, intermediate 2, and then all of the roots concatenated, which is like total bogus, terrible API. But the Z-tunnel and the sidecars are able to handle that and support multiple roots.
But it only works by accident, more or less, because.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Like it's total
yeah.
total hack crap. It would be great to have a different API, but it's hard to change the API. So
No, but you don't need an API. You just need to, read that from the config map, because the config map is pretty much guaranteed to have whatever it's intended to be the root of trust. And we trust bundle to be the same. I mean, that you will have the official roots number. You don't need to hack it.
yeah,
Anyway,
it just
that's
kind of
interesting.
changes semantics. Like if I use cert manager as the CA, for example, like it's not writing the config map. So just things like that. So it's definitely a mess for sure.
Luis? Are you somebody?
Yeah, Louis, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Oh yeah, sorry. There we go. Yeah, my question was why not use Alt-Z for this? Right, Alt-Z is allowed deny on traffic. We could extend Alt-Z to identify the intermediate authority and let people deny based on that. We already distribute that config. It's an existing API. It can compose with other features, so you could deny in specific cases, right? So you actually get more control. And if the scale is not ridiculous, then I don't think we care about scale.
I'm
why
checking
not
to
use-
see if Envoy's RBAC filter supports like certificate serial number or some appropriate interface. That would be my immediate question.
We can probably extend it to do that though, right? Like we can definitely do that with Z-tunnel.
Even if it does, wouldn't you have to
I-
update that policy like across hundreds or thousands of services
It's
potentially?
admin
Yeah.
policy.
Okay.
No, but there is also the problem that I don't think OTG is even receiving the full chain. I mean, it's certificate verification is one step, and OTG operates on the result of the identity. So OTG operates
Right,
on.
but that's just a propagation of the attributes in the metadata context in Envoy. Justin.
It will be pretty extensive change to extract. I mean, we tried in the, I mean, all the the format of the header and all the other crazy stuff that it's mind blowing.
Well, like consider all like other use cases that we've talked about, right? Where you want to bind an intermediate authority to regional or zonal, right, for jurisdictional control, and then you want to use Alt-C to enforce, right? Like those are real things.
Compared with just, I mean, for CRL in particular, if you just want revocation, it's basically using too big foot gun to much smaller problem. I mean, yeah, it is possible. I mean, everything is possible. You can write WASM filters that is doing that.
No, but like we have an existing API. It has the right expression format. It has the right scale.
I think Mike's point still stands though, because if you have a default policy in Istio system with all the non-allowed IAs, if a user has another auth policy that has their own service-specific config, they would have to copy those, wouldn't they?
No,
you just
they would
deny.
not.
You
Just
write
deny.
a policy that says everywhere deny. Deny
Yeah.
policies run first. So if any deny policy matches, it's denied, and it doesn't invoke the default allow or
Right.
allow none.
Well, hold on. So you have a deny policy with all your IAs, and then if a user has an allow policy, it'll run after the deny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to be 100% clear, you have in the policy you list the revoked ones, not the not revoked ones.
Right. It would be yes. Okay, that solved the scale problem then.
Well, it's not solve the scale problem. We still need to distribute this OTC policy. I mean, in some cases you may not have any OTC policy, so you are adding an OTC policy in case
Right,
you
but
don't.
Costin, if we're saying like hundreds, that's trivial, right? We don't care.
No,
Like,
it's all pods.
No, but yes, but also remember, like the config map distribution, like we're not worried about the scale of distributing 1K to every pod. And especially in Z-tunnel, we're definitely not worried because it's one node.
No, but I'm saying is that you have pod A talking with pod B. Today it doesn't have any OTC policy because it's just doing a direct call. It just need to know. I mean, basically it's based on identity, no OTC checks. Now for CRL, for revocation, you need everything to have OTC policy enabled. Even in some cases today, I think we bypass the OTC or it's empty.
No.
In a way.
Right, there's no performance loss here, Costin, versus the policy check. Like, yes, maybe the CRL can be implemented more efficiently than the OTC policy check.
Yeah.
The OTC policy check, if it's an empty list, right, is not necessarily a problem, right? And the cost of the check, like we measured the cost of the check, but like until we've actually measured it, like how do you know it's a problem? Like I don't want to prematurely optimize.
So, and I'm not saying we should not. I mean, putting the pieces in place to pass all the certificate and pass all the element. I mean, what you're proposing is very useful to have all the ability to make choices based on the certificate chains or individual sets. That's a pretty interesting project. But the simplest solution that solves the problem today versus a very complicated solution that is good for tons of other things, so it's valuable. But if you just want to revoke a certificate, you don't necessarily need to push all the policies towards and to change and to I don't know. It's possible. Everything is possible.
Like as far as the user is concerned,
very
Costin, like one is a new API, one is not.
There is no API here. You just put in a config map something and it will be duplicated.
A config map is an API. Let's not pretend it's not an API.
It's not a new API. We already use it to distribute the roots. And usually the same mechanism used to distribute the roots. It's usually used to distribute the revocation. I mean, it's common.
Can we look at this from like the extending the existing distribution mechanism we have for roots, and then just we're extending that for the config maps?
I care less about like how we actually implement this. I care more about the user experience. Like we can obviously solve the infrastructural problem, as has been discussed. There are many potential solutions to it, right? Config map distribution, XDS, right? We know we can make one of those work. The question is, what's the right API?
Sorry, Keith, your hand up.
I think I'm going to agree with Cost in the chat. I think that the benefit of using CRL is that it's a standard that is going to compose better with existing CA vendors. Going to compose, like if you can get a CRL from somewhere, you could run a job that gets your CRL from Google Certificate Authority or Fault or whatever else, pop it into a config map and at Istio to read it. If you rely on Istio policy, not only do you have to implement something in Envoy, which I don't know that they want. I don't think that really makes sense from an RBOT matcher perspective. But then the user's also now in Istio Island, and they have to write an auth-z policy to do a thing that every network's admin is going to think about as being a certificate revocation. That'll be my biggest argument towards it, is that we're being more consistent with the rest of the ecosystem when it comes to what this operation is. How do you revoke trust in the middle of as a result of a breach or something like that? It's going to be a much better user experience than something Istio specific.
So I buy that argument. Then the other question is, do you want to use the Alt-C mechanism as the implementation?
You need more. Go ahead, Faustin.
So let me split my answer in two parts. Yes, I think it will be very useful to have capabilities to make choices based on the root certificate, everything else as an implementation. But since my usual preference is to be interoperable and to allow foreign gateways for aid components to work with Istio, this is not something that anyone except Istio will be able to do or will do, because authorization, most other servers and most lack this ability, and we don't want to impose it. So we probably need to have at least a config map, because that will allow other components to mount the same config map and to use the CRL. If we also want some admin wants to do it through OZ with Istio only, then it's fine. I mean, having the capability is different than having a default implementation that is, baseline interoperability.
Costin, I'm not sure I get your interoperability requirement, since like we're only talking about Istio implementing CRL support. Like we don't control what other data planes do. So what is the interop requirement?
So if you have the config map, for example, or equivalent, I mean, you can have Nginx, for example, as the gateway if you want to deploy it. You mount the config map, you configure Nginx to use the CRL that is present in the config map, works. You don't have to do something special. You as an admin, you put the CRL somewhere, it goes everywhere.
Yeah, so as Keith said, like using CRL as a standardized format, totally fine. But what is Istio supposed to do to help Nginx?
Put the config revocation list on the config map and just like the root, because the Nginx will need to read this config map to get, I mean, in order to communicate with Istio sidecars or the tunnel, it needs to read the roots.
Right, but are you saying like Istio's namespace config map distributor is what Nginx is going to rely on?
It's going to rely on the fact there is a config map in each namespace created by Istio, read set manager, whoever, because set manager can also create this kind of config maps, by the way.
Okay, that's making a ton of assumptions about the integration patterns, though.
That's what set manager is using. Set manager is creating a config map in each namespace to exactly like Istio did. There is no difference.
Sure.
And you can put additional fields in there.
Right, and Nginx itself Nginx can also have a controller to do that.
Or Nginx, but probably they will rely on set manager because set manager is already there. So
yeah, I'm just saying, like, why is Istiod's integration requirement to do this?
It's not really an integration requirement. We generally try to avoid the dependency on set manager. So if we are using set manager and we say let set manager do all certificates, set manager can create the config map for us, and we can disable, remove all the code related with that in Istio and use a controller in set manager.
I think another argument could be like the plugin say today is also handled by the Istio, and this particular thing is specifically useful in that scenario. So probably also a good idea for let the Istio sort of handle and distribute the servers that would be required.
Yeah, no, just saying, like Costin's argument is it's fine for Istio to distribute it for Istio's purposes, right? But if Istio and then does that, and then other systems take a dependency on that, right, without it being explicit API, now we've created fragility in the system, right? Costin was saying that was an integration requirement, that Istio do that. I'm saying no, Istio is allowed to change how it implements this.
So the contract is that in each namespace you'll have a config map with root of trust and the revocation list. It may be a good idea to. Yeah,
Istio may choose at some point later on to do this over XDS, and we would deprecate that contract.
That's fine. Then you will break all the people who lie. And that manager will be used instead of Istio to deprecate it. It's not
right. So I'm just saying, let's not assert that this is an API.
Well, additionally, I think I'd be much more comfortable with sort of taking that same use case and moving it into sandwich mode, where the Nginx proxy is not making auth-n, auth-z decisions. Those are made by the Z tunnel, and Nginx can do whatever L7 routing magic it wants to do. That keeps all of the root of trust, the CRL, keeps it all in-house rather than having to integrate in some complex ways with other proxies.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that.
So Louis, again, I don't think we decided too much. I mean, my point is Trust Manager is based on volumes. That's what they will probably do because, again, if they distribute, and if we switch completely to Trust Manager, there is no point of Istio doing anything related to certificates because Trust Manager is kind of the universal solution. Maybe the implementation should not even modify Istio. Maybe you should try to use Cert Manager. So if someone needs revocation list and intermediary and everything else, how are you going to generate the intermediary? Call it Cert Manager because Istio doesn't generate intermediary. Maybe you should implement this in Cert Manager, and when Cert Manager is used, we already support it. I mean, it kind of already works. I don't know, and that will be universal and probably far more useful mechanism to distribute if you generate intermediaries with Cert Manager.
Yeah, I think I think also like one of the things that like I was thinking is like how the CRLs are generated. It's probably out of the scope of Istio. Like Istio, the behavior could be like, hey, if it is provided to Istio on the bootstrap, then it will just honor it and then distribute it. And if not, it's just like a business as usual today.
Yeah, if there's some other standard, like widely adopted CRL distribution and maintenance mechanism, we should take a long, hard look at using it rather than building it. I definitely agree with that, Custom.
Cert Manager does have some CRL awareness, but it's largely through a field that is meant to contain a URI, where you can retrieve a CRL for a given certificate. So it's a fairly different model.
No, but they have a controller like Istio that is creating config maps, and you can put, if I remember correctly, random stuff there. So they can create fields. And in general, it needs to be integrated. I mean, it's kind of you don't want to if you generate intermediary CAs in one way, you probably want to have an integrated solution that generates the config maps. So basically disable the controller in Istio default namespace and let the other CA solution, whatever it is, generate the same stuff.
Costin, if you can drop a link to Cert Manager docs about that config map, it would at least be good to take a good look at it as we proceed with this design.
I only played with having Cert Manager generate the root CA intermediaries for Istio. I haven't checked, but that was 2 years ago.
I'll take a look at it, and that's it. Any other questions?
One thing that Louis said, which is absolutely right, is that this is effectively an API. So if we are deciding to put it to use a config map, we need to document, hey, this is the field that is going to be used, and anyone who's mounting this config map expects this field. Make sure that Cert Manager can do the same thing, or whoever Vault or other things, because that's a common solution to generate config maps in all namespaces. And perhaps also make it a contract and document it very clearly as an API that where the root certificates are stuffed in Istio. Because right now it's an implementation detail, but since intermediate CAs and all what you are discussing is usually cross projects, not Istio specific, it's good to document, hey, Istio expect whatever CA solution exists to create those config maps and Trust Manager to create the equivalent thing, and that's what we are reading. And someone else may or may not create it.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So I think we probably then have at least the loose consensus about trying out the config map approach. So what I'll do is I'll update the design, and also I'll probably start implementing it, and like I'll put out a PR, then we all can probably review it and maybe discuss it even further. Sorry.
So leaving aside implementation detail, I noticed the doc doesn't talk a lot about telemetry and logging, right? We need to describe and be very clear how we intend to report revoked certificate handshake denials as what kind of error. Right, this is critically important.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Cool.
This is an admin function, right? And the admin has said, I want to deny this traffic, right? So semantically, it's similar to auth Z, even if the implementation and distribution mechanisms are different, right? So how is that information categorized? Where does it go? It needs to be in the design.
Okay, cool. And thanks for bringing that up. I had not looked into that. I will also do some reading around it and try to come up with some points about it.
Yeah,
Do we have a
the
way that
ideal.
we- Sorry, go ahead, Louis.
Go ahead, Mitch. I was going to say, like, even if we deny the handshake, we should still log the principles, right? Which is going to make your implementation a bit more complicated, by the way. Right, because we want to know who was trying to communicate with an invalid certificate. We can't just say connection denied and not log anything about it. That's not okay.
Do we have existing logging for authentication failures?
For auth Z, we do, and for request auth N, we do. So it should go look. I would go look at those as kind of recommended.
Yeah.
Exemplars.
Okay.
And yeah, very specifically, users will need to be able to distinguish between handshakes failed, between this class and like user space TLS, right? With just our statically configured, right? So log messages need to look different. The metrics need to look different, etc.
But okay, I'll probably take a look at it. But my immediate thought is like, isn't proxies going to either accept or reject that handshake? Like, do we have a mechanism for Istio to get those results from proxy? I'm not sure how.
I don't know.
Okay.
Exercise left the reader.
Okay.
No, we so it's complicated. We do have a bit of better messages than we had 5 years ago, but it's still super hard to debug any handshake error because and you don't want the client to know why you rejected it because then it's a particular discussion. But yeah, we should improve the logging at least in Zitano. I agree with Louis. It should be very clear why the set was rejected.
Yeah, like if it's really hard in Envoy, okay. Right, we should open a GitHub issue in Envoy and say, look, when we're rejecting for CRL, we'd like to log, right? Obviously the handshake, as Costin said, the client should not be told that it was rejected because of CRL failure, right? You don't want to tell the attacker what the vulnerability is, but you do want the log message on the server side to be precise.
Are you sure you don't want that? There's an alert in TLS that is specifically for revoked certificates.
I think it's okay to, well, so like there's certificate expired, right? But is there actually a message back in the handshake saying that the peer was revoked?
Yep.
That is interesting. All right, we're going to have to, can you put that in the doc? I think we're going to have to think about that one.
What part exactly? Sorry.
So when a client connects and the certificate it's using was revoked, should the server tell it by putting the error message in the TLS handshake back? Or should it put something more obfuscated, which is like rejected, right? As John notes, there is a message that goes in the server hello, I guess, which is your certificate's been revoked. It is a leak of information in some sense, right? From a security privilege standpoint, but it's also part of the protocol. So we have to make a decision. So in your example, Nick, when you want to use CRLs, is it because an attacker has gotten a certificate and you need to revoke the IA because you want to prevent there was some weakness, right? If the attacker now uses that certificate and finds it was revoked, what they'll next do is try and get another one, right? That's the leak of privileged information.
Right, and that's one of the use case. The other use case that I'm tackling this for is the multi-cluster, where like if the cluster if the cluster leaves the multi-cluster setup, then we don't want any TLS handshake happen between our existing mesh versus
right. So you want to do mesh partitioning. Can you capture that, by the way, in the doc? Those two use cases.
I think I have.
Did you? I was trying to
Yeah.
catch it. Maybe I missed it.
Let me confirm. But I think I added a section of user stories.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, never mind. I just missed it.
Nice.
Actually, it's not in the goals section, but maybe it's somewhere else.
It's down requirements.
I see decommissioning, intermediate CA compromise. There's
I see it in requirements, but I'll agree. It probably wants more specific detail about why do I want to. Oh no, there is CA decommissioning. I see it.
well, that's different than I want to do mesh partitioning.
I am not sure what mesh partitioning is. Sorry.
So I have a multi-cluster mesh, and I want to break out. I want to split the mesh into two sets of clusters with different root CAs. So they can't talk to each other anymore. Right. So now you have two meshes instead of one.
Right.
Right.
I mean, not necessarily. Like just cluster just probably decide to just leave the mesh and then either try to work independently or yeah, you can treat that as a separate mesh. So yeah. Okay.
That just looks like
Decommissioning
a
is
root cert rotation on the clusters that are leaving. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Right, but you want to use the CRL to make it immediate, right? That's the goal, as opposed to wait X amount of time.
Correct. Okay.
Neelix, is there any more input or guidance you feel like you need before you can start hammering on this?
No, I think I'm good. I'll update both design and then start implementing also, and probably I'll bug some of you on Slack. Sorry in advance for that, maybe. But thanks for the feedback and the discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Any last minute topics or announcements that we need before we wrap up? All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same channel.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
all.
Thanks, Noel.
Thanks all.
Appreciate it.